Hi, and welcome to the fifth grade curriculum preview for the fourth 6 weeks. I'm Brenda Swerzinski, your elementary science coordinator, and I'm going to be leading you through the presentation with just a couple of voiceover notes. If you would like to use the version without the voiceover, you can go back to this more and just simply view the slides and then take a look at the notes that I've written in the bottom. So whatever works best for you is great. Just a reminder that we should be making sure that we utilize the unit overviews. Those are updated in Canvas about 3 weeks before the 6 weeks starts. And if you're not utilizing those, you might be wasting time looking for some resources or looking through the resources when I have some notes there for you. So this is just a screen to remind you how to access those since we've moved those into Canvas. And you can pause it and take a look at those instructions if that's something that you need. Okay, so looking ahead at the pacing guide for this upcoming 6 weeks, we have 2 student holidays. Those are marked there in red on January 15th and then February 19th. And then we have a science CBA. It's actually after the fourth 6 weeks is over, but I just wanted to make note of that as that comes right after the end of the 6 weeks. As always, the CBA blueprint can be found in Canvas under assessment information, and that's in the yearly content documents. So let's take a little bit closer look at the pacing guide. We've got about 20, 26, 27 days for 8 content standards, and then I've organized those into 3 mini units. Now, 8 content standards is a lot, but remember some of those are review supporting standards from 3rd and 4th grade, and then some of them are new. So we'll take a look at the pacing, and then we'll take a look at what's new and what's review in a couple of slides in a little bit more detail. So for now, if you'll, I know there's a lot on the screen, so we're just going to take this one mini unit at a time. So let's just take a look at the first mini unit. That's going to be 10 days on landforms, and we're going to be focusing on rapid changes and slow changes. So the rapid changes would be that first bullet point where we're going to be having students investigate volcanoes, earthquakes, and landslides. Now, this is from 3rd grade, so this is a review. So when you pace out these 3 bullet points for the 10 days, you'll want to give more time to that last bullet point here because this is new information. This bullet point and this bullet point, those 2 standards, those we're going to give less time to because they're obviously going to be review. The second bullet point here, it refers to the standard 4.7b, and that is where we look at slow changes versus the rapid changes from 3rd grade. Slow changes, weathering, erosion, and deposition from wind, water, and ice. So many times we remember the 3 ways that those slow changes happen, the WED, but we need to be sure we're connecting that with how wind, weathers rocks and erodes rocks and deposits rocks. Water does that same thing, and so does ice. There's more information about that and details in the unit overview if you need a little bit more detail about that. Finally, that first mini unit of the 10 days, we're going to round that out with some new information. So we need to spend a little bit more time on that. And that's going to be 5.7b, which is a readiness standard. And that is going to be having students be able to recognize how deltas, canyons, and sand dunes are the result of changes by wind, water, and ice. So you can see here that there's a correlation between these last 2 points. Specifically, 5.7b does not mention weathering, erosion, and deposition, but those processes are what forms deltas, canyons, and sand dunes. So that's why we have 4.7b in there as a review. Looking forward to the next 10 days, that's when we're going to be looking at soil, sedimentary rock, and fossil fuels, and then fossil formation. So that's a lot of content all in one, and that covers 3 different standards. We have one standard that is a review, and that's 4.7a, and that's that first bullet point right here. Students are going to be examining properties of soil, and the ones that are listed in the standard are color, texture. The biggies are capacity to retain water and the ability to support the growth of plants. So they're going to be needing to test out different soil types: gravel, sand, clay, silt, potting soil, and then look and see how much each one of those soils retain water, hold the water, and then what happens when we try to grow plants from seed in each types of those. And again, you'll find more detail about all of this in the unit overview. The last two standards that are in this second unit are going to be exploring sedimentary rock formation and fossil fuel formation. So how are sedimentary rocks formed? And fossil fuels are found within sedimentary rocks, so those two go nicely together. And again, if you need details about how that process happens, STEMscope's teacher background for that standard is a great place, as well as the unit overview. And then we round out another new standard with 5.7D, which is identifying fossils as evidence of past organisms and environments using models. So fossils are going to be found within sedimentary rock, so it makes sense for us to be looking at fossils within this context. The last mini unit for the fourth 6 weeks is going to be 7 days, and that's going to be covering Earth's energy resources. And here we're talking about reviewing renewable and non-renewable from 4th grade, and then talking about alternative energy resources. So that's a new concept right there. So when we talk about renewable and non-renewable, you'll notice that the standard actually lists out what renewable resources we should look at, which includes, and I've got them written here, air, plants, water, and animals. And then when we talk about non-renewable, we're talking about coal, oil, and natural gas. We also need to talk about conservation of both renewable and non-renewable. You'll notice that when we talk about non-renewable resources, the coal, oil, and natural gas, that's a nice spiral back to fossil fuels, because those are fossil fuels. So if you can talk a little bit about coal, oil, and natural gas up here, that could save you a little bit of time here. Or alternatively, if you kind of get crunched on that second part of the 6 weeks right here, this mini unit, you could probably buy back a little bit more review here. We end up for 6 weeks with 5.7C, which is a new concept for students, and that's alternative energy resources. So when we talk about alternative energy resources, what that means is alternative to fossil fuels. So we're talking about ways to make electricity, or ways to power motors and power things that are alternative to fossil fuels. So we're talking about wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal, and biofuels. On top of all of those contents, there you're going to see the process skills that we have partnered. And those are actually already integrated into most of the lessons within STEM scopes and aims, but I just want you to be aware that those are the pieces that are put into this unit as well. We're going to take another look at that in the pacing guide. So what I just showed you was a summary, kind of a bulleted point of an outline view of the pacing guide. I want to make sure you know where to find the pacing guide. If you go to the unit overview, which again, there's a slide at the beginning of this presentation that shows you how to get there. The pacing guide is actually linked right there at the top. And then when you click on it, this is what it looks like. So here are all the standards that we just talked about. And here are the process skills that we have partnered. And again, you can teach these as many lessons if you feel like your students need to, but again, most of the STEM scopes and aims are going to have those process skills integrated in. We just want to be very aware of what those partnering process skills are, especially as they look, how they look on dual coding on STAR. Okay, so now let's look at it through the lens of what's new to your 5th graders. So brand new is going to be all of those things listed on the screen. And the reason I have red and blue is because the red represents readiness standards, and then the blue represents supporting standards. So when we look at what's most important, what is the most important thing for us to hit when we have Unit 4? Well, if it's new content, we need to be sure to give that a little bit more time. Or really assess our students and see what their misconceptions are, or what their understanding is of that. And especially if they're readiness standards, because those are going to be standards that are a lot more complex and probably abstract. So this can help you, again, pace that out. And if you go back to the pacing guide, you'll see that that color coding can kind of help you as you move through the pacing guide there too. You'll see there's one readiness standard in each one of those 3 mini units there to help you plan that out. What's review? That is going to be everything that is up on the screen right now. You'll notice that everything that's in blue is a supporting standard, so maybe tested on STAR this year. I just have a note there off to the side that technically 4.7b is not listed as supporting standard, but really it contains the information about weathering, erosion, and deposition, and that's really key for students to understand how those landforms are formed when we talk about deltas and canyons and sand dunes, how those are formed by wind, water, and ice. So it's really an essential review piece to add in. Okay, so that's a lot of content. So how do we tackle it all? I highly recommend that you pre-assess, especially before the review pieces for this unit. And also throw in lots of formative assessments as you go through the unit. That really should be guiding your instruction. If you're seeing students have some misconceptions, those formative assessments can really help you kind of sidetrack for a little bit and then hit that so you can move on. On this screen, you'll see several different resources to help you find some pre-assessment resources as well as formative assessments. And I'll let you look at those at your leisure. There's a strategy I'm going to go ahead and show you that I mentioned on this screen, and that's taking a STAR release item and making it into kind of like a probe, which I've shown 5th grade teachers earlier in the year, and then use the sticky bar strategy. So this is a lot of content, so feel free to pause it, and then when you're ready to move on, we'll look at the strategies that are listed. Okay, so the sticky bar formative assessment is one that some of you have seen me use before, and I think it's a very powerful strategy. It really helps you get into the students' heads about what they're thinking, more so than just a simple multiple choice question. So this is how it works. You've got the step-by-step instructions over there on the left-hand side. Students are given a short question that's either multiple choice or a short answer. The key is that you have different choices that they have to make. So they're going to have to commit to either a particular answer choice or, as you'll see in a moment, agreeing with a particular explanation of something. You can have the students give their feedback anonymously. They could write it on a sticky note and then pass the teacher, or you can have the students switch papers, not put their name on it, but switch papers, and then other students will represent what's on their paper, so everyone could do that with a safer manner. If you feel like you need to know individual student results, of course, you can ask students to put their names on their papers, maybe on the back. And then so what you want to see as a class and then as a teacher is a representation of their answer choices. So here's an example on the screen. The teacher just puts up a simple question. This might be a guiding question for the upcoming mini unit. What agent of change is responsible for creating a canyon? And then on the board, you can simply write erosion, deposition, weathering, other, or I don't know. Now, this is a review question from 4th grade, so this would be very appropriate for you to use in this manner to see if your students remember the difference between erosion, deposition, weathering, or if they just really don't know. That's a great place for you to get started. As a class, you can see the results here is lots of I don't know, so that means that the teacher's going to go back through and really hit back on the meaning and maybe processes of what those are. So there's one example of how you can use this. Another strategy that I had listed on the previous slide was how to take a release STAR item and turn it into a formative assessment probe. Now, if you remember, we did this back in Unit 2, and you have access to those probes that I created for you in your shared in the shared drive that we created for 5th grade. There's the link right there. And again, if you're watching the video presentation, you can get to that. It's in all 5th grade science teachers drive. You could just search for it, or you can go back to the actual slides in this more, and it's linked live there as well. So I want to talk to you about how I would take a release star item and then turn it into more of an open-ended probe. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the released question, and this is for 5.7b from 2015, okay? There's an image of a wide U-shaped valley, and then the question asks, how is this valley formed? And you have different choices. You could use the sticky bar assessment with this. This is pretty straightforward. Or you can probably get more discussion going and a little bit more information if you were to take this and turn it into a formative assessment probe. So all I did was use the snipping tool to take the image and put it into a template, which you can get into in the shared folder. I just gave it a title for the concept of this question, and then I just simply took the meat of the idea of the question and I put it into a little narrative. So I said students were viewing different images of landscapes in their class. When they saw this image, they began a discussion about how it was formed. And then I made up 4 names, and then I took each one of the answer choices and I just put it into a comment that maybe one of those students would make. I tried to stick with the overall meaning of what the answer choice was and tried to keep the responses somewhat equal within their weight. So Ray says it formed from a glacier a long time ago and it scraped away the soil. So you can see there's a little bit more information than just the original released item. Scott says, I think a flash flood came through and washed it away. Yolanda says the snow melted, ran down the side of the mountain and washed the soil out. And then Miles says, I think it was a hurricane. So you'll see each one of those answer choices represented there on the left. The key part of this, in addition to the additional information that I have in there with the student responses, it's key right down here. Which student do you agree with the most, and explain why you agree with them. You can still use the sticky bar assessment with this, but I think what's going to be really helpful is going to be this open-ended piece at the bottom. So here's what it would look like with the sticky bar formative assessment. Students would fill out the paper, go ahead and choose one of the students to agree with, explain why. They could anonymously switch papers in some way, and then students could come up and represent the answer that is shown on their paper. So if again we look at these results, we see that most of the students agreed with Scott, saying that a flash flood came through and washed it away, which is a common misconception. That's the way that canyons are formed, and this looks very much like a canyon, although a canyon has more of a V-shaped valley rather than a U-shape. So that could be something that the teacher the next day could come back and talk about and really guide his or her instruction to fit what the students think. So just a quick overview of 2 strategies that could really help you make your way through all of these 8 content standards. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with just a couple of technology ideas. These are all really neat ways that you can use technology for Unit 4. And again, you can pause this and take a look at these a little bit more closely if you'd like to. A reminder about vocabulary. Make sure that you're using vocabulary that's actually coming from the standard clarifier. If you rely on the STEMscopes picture vocabulary or maybe the vocabulary that's in Mentoring Minds, it will not be a complete list. So make sure that you're checking the clarifier there. And just a reminder, all the clarifiers are actually linked on the first page of the unit overview. So if you can get to the unit overview, and again, there's that slide at the beginning of the show, then you can find the pacing guide and the clarifier as well. Okay, finally, I just wanted to show some examples of some interactive word walls and anchor charts for a couple of things. These were found from Dr. Jackson's Science Toolkit Facebook page. And I thought these were kind of interesting. I highly suggest that when you see interactive word walls or anchor charts on whatever resource you're looking at, Science Toolkit, or maybe you look up some things on Pinterest or Teacher Pay Teacher, always look at them with a critical eye and think about what about it might work for you. How would you change it to be more student-centered or more clear? This has a lot of information, and perhaps it was built over time as students discussed it. And so just kind of taking a look and taking the best ideas of what you see out there and making them your own. Here's another example of a picture I found from Dr. Jackson's Science Toolkit on Facebook. I thought this was interesting in that they have divided out the formation of coal and then the formation of fossil fuels, which is a little bit of a I think, nomer here. And I have a note down there at the bottom of how I might change that to make it a little bit more clear. It appears that really what they were trying to look at was showing how coal is formed, because I see it says swamp and peat, which is correct, versus oil and natural gas, which is formed in a marine environment. But they both have things in common, like the cementation you see down here. They both have compaction. They both have the layers here, youngest to oldest and so forth. So one of the things I thought was nice about this is that this teacher brought in the I claim because, or the CER statement. So you could introduce this to your student over several different days and then talk to them about how they can use this graphic to make a claim statement. So I just wanted to show you an example of that. Okay. Finally, I wanted to wrap up by just reminding you that I am here for you. Please reach out to me as your academic coach. I'm here for a phone call, an email, a classroom visit, or a visit with you to help you plan whatever you need. And be looking for a couple of more science support meetings in the spring. We'll have 2 more after school informal PLCs, much like we did in the fall. And then in April, you can be looking for the Science Star Review session. I hope you have a great 6 weeks. I hope that you will reach out to me if I can be of any support to you. No question is too small or a request too big for me to handle, because I want to support you in your success with elementary science in 5th grade. Hope you have a great 6 weeks, and thanks so much for joining me.